All right, well, good morning. It's nice to see you all. It feels like it's been way too long. I'm so sorry to cancel last week. I hate canceling for so many reasons. One, I love the unit on gender. And so I was super sad to have that be the unit that we had to miss. And then two, it always just makes me feel off and behind. Like it's so much more work to cancel than it is to just be here, right? So I'm so sorry for that. It was kind of a rough week. My middle child was violently sick all week. And so on Monday, that meant my other two were like, well, I shouldn't have to go either. So we all just stayed in like a germ-infested house together. And then by Wednesday, my oldest had to have like emergency dental surgery where they put her under general anesthesia, pulled out 2 teeth. And then we flooded, like our patio flooded with the rain. It's been exciting. Not really, but like it's been challenging. So I'm very grateful to be here and away from all of that. There was one positive though, and I'm showing this to everyone just because I can. We adopted like a little kitty last week, and this kitty is so ridiculously cute. So this is Kitty. Right? Don't you just like, I just want to go home and grab him. He's so cute. One of my partner's students was like, I can't keep him. And we're like, we'll take him. We have 4 cats already. We're like, what's one more, right? Like, why not? He's trying to pawn off the other 2. But this is little Kitty, and then like just so like literally like this big, like 2 like will fit in the palm of your hand. We can't find this cat half the time. And we've been debating between Chowder as a name, because he's white with like pepper on top. Like, I don't know, maybe Chowder or Noodle, right? Because then we keep singing like the Noodle song from like the Wonka movie with that goes with it. And then Cheetos, because he cost a bag of Cheetos. That was the cost of it. My partner student was like, well, you could give me a bag of Cheetos and we'll call it even. I was like, we should name him Cheetos. That would be perfect. But that was like the one advantage of last week is this cute little kitty. I love this picture, right? Just let him stare at you the whole time. He's so adorable, right? And now we have another boy in the house. We didn't have very many boys in our house, so now we have another one. But other than that, again, I'm so sorry to not be here. I hope that you watched the video on chapter 4 and that you kind of read through everything. I know the video is a couple of years old, but I figured it would be better than just reading it on your own. So hopefully you're feeling okay about that. And that will kind of keep us back on track where we can start chapter 5 today, and then we won't be behind. So are there any questions or anything about like, did you all get the announcement? So apparently there were some like, people were saying the announcements like went to the bottom and like there were issues. Did you all see the announcement about the class being canceled and everything? Okay, good. I sent them out as early as I knew, hoping that you wouldn't wake up early and come here. Everyone survived the rain? Anyone else get like flooding or issues? Yeah.
Because like I worked at a sandwich shop, so no one goes there for dinner.
Right.
So it was empty, but like I was in the back and I heard it and I ran out and it was just like,
Wow. How scary. The whole feeling was.
yeah, it was weird because like we had a feeling to have this right. I went back to my manager and he was like, or is he like at a party drunk? And I was like, oh wow, okay, this isn't a me problem. I don't feel
Okay. Wow, what a mess. Yeah, that's not fun at all. Anybody else? issues yet?
On my way home from choir practice, yes, so I went to choir practice in Pennsylvania.
Oh,
And on my way home, I witnessed like I passed by like 4 separate accidents.
yeah.
And like 2 of them were blocked off by emergency personnel,
Mhm.
and it was insane.
Yeah, people don't drive well in the rain here. and
Every ounce of common sense, it's all
It's
gonna
true.
drop of rain.
It is
The moment
true.
they get in
it is
the
true.
car.
Yeah, the moment they get in the car, and if there's rain, you're really screwed, right? See, I went to Humboldt State where it like rains a ton, so I was like, this wasn't that much rain. So I felt like karma was getting back at me because I was laying in bed last night going like, that wasn't hardly any rain. Though like on TikTok, I could see everyone in like San Diego and Long Beach and some of these places underwater. Didn't get that much. But like laminate floors and they were just underwater. So it was such a mess this morning. I felt like that was the universe's way of being like, yeah, it rained a lot, right? All right, fine. I got you now. So we're almost done with it. I think it's gonna rain a little bit today and tomorrow, but not heavy. And like we were talking about, I'm surprised they kept the campus open. Like I feel like if anything happens, they close this campus. So that we're here today is surprising, but fantastic. I'm glad we're here because we missed last week. And then Wednesday, I wrote it up there, and this is nothing to do with me. Wednesday is a campus-wide flex day. Have your other teachers mentioned that to you yet? Hopefully they will if they haven't. What that means is there are no classes for all of you on Wednesday, but there are classes for us on Wednesday. So I will be here hoping they give us good lunch for our professional development day, but all of you don't have class on Monday or Wednesday. So it should be that you don't have any assignments or any classes. So I'm glad that we got to have class today for that reason. Okay. Are there any like other questions, thoughts, anything about like the stuff that we've covered before we move on to where we are at now, which will be starting chapter 5 today? Anything else? If you're looking at your syllabus, so obviously we don't have class Wednesday. And then we'll keep going with anatomy, female anatomy, then male anatomy. There's a campus holiday later in the month, and then we'll have our first exam in a few weeks. So, definitely kind of moving along. I can't believe it's February already, right? Can't believe it's February. Though I saw Easter stuff in the store yesterday. I'm like, wait, I haven't got my Valentine's candy yet. Hold on. Always like a month or two ahead. But what we will do today is start chapter 5. Looking at female reproductive anatomy. And then chapter 6 is male reproductive anatomy. But before we get here, I'll leave this picture up while we do it, right? Because it's just so cute, right? What I want you to do, thank you. I'd like you to get into groups of like 4 to 5 people. Whatever's convenient around you. You could turn your desks if you want. You're going to spend about like 10 minutes with your group. But find like 4 or 5 people, whatever you need, go ahead and get in a group. What was that? That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just try and get close to each other so that we can all see each other. I'm trying to build in. Okay. Oh, so cute. Okay. Does everybody have a? Okay, if you have a textbook or like your laptop or anything, go ahead and close those for now, or just don't like write them anyway. Are you what? I don't know. I was trying to build intrigue by slowly ripping these off and not knowing what we were doing. But what I'm going to have you do in a minute is send one person from each group up. And what I'd like you to grab piece of paper, big piece of paper. Grab a couple of markers. I've got a bunch of different black markers. And then I want you to grab one of these little pieces of paper. On this piece of paper, it has a bunch of structures of female anatomy listed. What I'd like you to do as a group is to draw and label these structures. We haven't covered them yet, So if you don't know what it is or where it is, feel free to be creative or funny, but do your best. You can draw one image or two. Oftentimes people will draw one internal image and one external image, but it's totally up to you. You can start in pencil and then go over with marker, but make sure you write all of your first and last names on your sheet, as I'm going to collect it for points. Okay, so when you're ready, and don't look it up, but do the best you can. Grab a piece of paper, some markers, and then one of these little sheets, and go ahead and start drawing. Grab a couple. Yeah.
Wait, is this one?
Yeah, is that? Oh, grab it. Yeah, it's been sitting here for like a week. You should take it. I'm like, even if it's not, it's fine. You can grab a couple, so and all that fun. Stuff together.
Yes.
Wherever you think it's. And who wants it?
Right.
Are we doing separate diagram? Separate diagram for instance.
But as far as.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so that else.
Yeah.
People in program. Yeah.
So let's try and take like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Done?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm in.
It's like that, but no.
I was like, oh, yeah, I want. Yeah.
But it's, cause there's the.
I want so many people.
It's right. It's right.
Oh, yeah, it's like this.
Okay, I didn't know that. I don't know. Line was, I don't know, like,
Like that's also. It's.
So do we just wanna shut some up here? Yeah.
And then you can put all the markers and stuff back and.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more minutes and then when you're done, make sure you write the first and last names on it. Person. You're at home.
Good job.
Yeah, that way I can.
Right.
Beautiful artist.
Yes.
That's what I need. I know I can't.
Here's one of it.
Yeah.
I just feel like my old art teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. I prefer this in much faster. How is the activity?
All right, done. We
Oh,
have your beautiful-
well, I'm so worried. We have to like go over to like the bridge. Oh, yeah, close to that and then. Pretty chill. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you don't. All right, anybody else done? Shall I try to start finishing up?
It's really fancy. Yeah. Go here on the. We put the line there. And then where's the. Oh, we did it. Yeah, we did it. Yeah. Of course.
All right, do I have everyone? All right, here we go. Amazing. All right. How did it go? I saw so many, I walked around and everyone going like this. I used to leave them, but then I got in really big trouble one time. And like the rebel in me wants to leave them up anyway. Like, I was like, well, what? People learned something and they're like, it was distracting. All right, well, sorry. So just as a way to kind of introduce, all right, right, to introduce these parts of anatomy, because we're going to talk about them. And I wanted two pictures, which I think is fantastic, like the internal and external structures. Which one gave you the hardest time? Which one didn't you know? I can guess. The external is harder, yeah? Or that too, yeah, either. The Mons Veneris, right? I have to tell you, I've had some very creative images of the Mons Veneris. The Mons Veneris is actually like the fatty covering of the pubic bone, the part that's typically covered with hair. Mound of Venus or Mons Veneris. So I have seen Veneris Targaryen, Count Mons Veneris, and the USS Mons Veneris. Like I've had people draw some pretty creative things. Yeah. Yeah, so the Mons Veneris, the pubis. And that goes, the other one that some of you struggle with is the perineum, which is that smooth stretch of skin. So we'll talk about all of these structures and parts of anatomy, just a way to kind of get you warmed up and into it. I'm a horrible artist, so I'm grateful I didn't have to draw. Some of you were so confident. I love that. So nicely done. I'll leave them up here if you'd like to take pictures with them or anything at the end, right? So here is an image of like all of the external genitals of like female reproductive anatomy. And collectively, we tend to call all of this the vulva, right? So the vulva tends to kind of refer to all of the external genitals of a female. Kind of an awkward picture. You get some even better awkward pictures in male anatomy. But the mons veneris, you can see up at the top, the mound of Venus or the mons pubis, sometimes called. And then the perineum, that thin stretch. Most of you got the labia or the lips correct. The majora are the bigger outer ones, the minora, the smaller inner ones. But let's talk about some of these structures. I'm going to write like a key term or a word or two up here on the board with each one. So the vulva, again, collectively refers to all of like the external anatomy. Okay, so even though like some places like here might be enclosed within like the labia, for example, we're talking about external anatomy rather than internal anatomy, which we have with like the fallopian tubes and the uterus and so on, which we'll get to in a moment. No two vulvas are the same, right? I've interviewed quite a few gynecologists over time. Everybody's vulva is slightly different in appearance, in color. I have some images. This was a very dangerous Google search, I must say. But some images of different vulvas and different presentations, hair versus no hair. Again, no two being the same, a lot of variety, but the structures have that similarity. And we'll talk about some of the purposes and function of the different structures as well. I'm gonna go back here. I'm not sure which picture is better or worse, right? But the vulva is all of the, again, external, including everything that you would see here. The mons veneris or mons pubis. Mound of Venus. And again, it's that like fatty area that covers the pubic bone. And this is typically the region that you would see that might be covered in hair or not, depending on somebody's preference after adolescence. But it's Latin for after Venus, the Roman goddess of love and beauty. They named that area after her. But the main job of a mons veneris or mons pubis is protection and cushioning, especially during like intercourse, right? It's a fatty area of tissue to prevent like bruising and like discomfort that could happen during like male-female coitus or intercourse. So it's kind of the main function of that. The labia, so we have the labia majora. And the labia minora. Collectively often referred to as like the lips of the vulva, right? The majora are the bigger ones, like think major, they're bigger on the outside. The labia majora, same function, kind of like cushioning and protecting. We could add that up here as well for like the mons veneris. The labia minora, though, a little bit different. The labia minora are the much thinner, smaller inner lips, actually have an incredible amount of like sweat and oil glands and blood vessels and nerve endings. They play a really big role in arousal, right? When a woman becomes aroused, right, it is these like sweat and oil glands that produce that lubrication within the vulva, right? So they have a big role with all these blood vessels and nerve endings in arousal and also in lubrication, like as part of any kind of like sexual activity. The clitoris, and a couple of you put it on its own, which I thought was kind of fun, giving it its own. The monument in Greece, right, according to that documentary. One function. Anyone know what the one function of the clitoris is? Yeah.
Nerve endings?
What was that?
Nerve endings?
Okay, that's a big part of it. It's got a lot of dense nerve endings. Stimulation or pleasure, right? Because of all the nerve endings. Now, for a lot of years, it was thought that the clitoris, because it was such a sensitive part of the body, should be acknowledged in passing, but not dwelled upon, right? Those were like the exact terms that they used, that the only way a woman could orgasm was through like penetration of that Grafenberg or G-spot, which we'll talk about later. But the clitoris is a very dense nerve ending, bless you, covered with like the clitoral hood that tends to be the most sensitive part of female anatomy. And something that we didn't get into too much last week because we didn't meet is that male and female anatomy are very like analogous, right? They tend to kind of have their similar component to each other. And so when we're developing in the womb, you actually can't tell whether a baby is male or female for quite some time. It's like 14, 15 weeks. The structures are the exact same. So the clitoral hood in the clitoris is actually the same tissue as makes up the head of the penis, which is the most sensitive part of male anatomy. So what we see is we have these like similar structures, similar in sensitivity as well between men and women in terms of anatomy. A few other things up here, the urethra. Right, this is the place where like urine would pass from the bladder. So two different like openings. We have the vaginal opening and then the urethral opening, right? So this is where again urine would come out and pass from the bladder. The hymen, which you can't see in this image, the hymen has like a common slang term. Anyone know what the common slang term for hymen is? It starts with a C, if that helps you. Cherry, I heard a couple people say it. The hymen is this tiny little flap of skin that covers the vaginal opening. And oftentimes when a woman has intercourse for the first time, and they have that cherry popped, right? This is where the term comes from, or their hymen ruptured, they might have a little bit of bleeding as a result. It could also happen from inserting like a tampon or like a finger or something else, right? Sometimes it just happens on its own. But remember, Kinsey's wife had a restricted hymen, and it kept them from being able to have intercourse. It was very painful for her. So this is something that, interestingly, has a lot of like historical significance. When women were being checked to see if they were still a virgin, right back in like medieval times and even later, what they would do is see if the hymen was still intact. And if the hymen was intact, they were deemed virgin and virtuous and clear. And if it was ruptured or gone, it was thought that they had had intercourse. Not at all a perfect system, as it can rupture on its own, but it tends to be something that had some historical significance and has that common like slang term, cherry, popping somebody's cherry, or like having that hymen be removed. Last thing up here, the perineum. There's this thin stretch of skin right here for men as well as for women. If you've ever heard of a woman tearing during childbirth, not to make you think of that, sorry, this is the stretch of skin that can actually sometimes tear if a baby's head is very large. Doesn't happen as much as it used to, but an episiotomy is this procedure for if a woman tears your stitching her back up. Doesn't happen a lot, but it sometimes can. But these are all of the like external genitals and structures, right, that you would see in female reproductive anatomy. And we're going to do this with this unit and also with the next unit, so you can start thinking about it. But with your same group, or if you want to have different people, it's fine. I want you to come up with as many slang terms for like vulva or vagina or like downstairs female anatomy, right? As you can. Write them down because I'm hoping you will read it and share with the class. You're welcome to be resourceful and look online as well. There is an incredible amount of slang, right? We're learning the proper terms, but let's get some of the slang out as well. So with a group, whatever's convenient, write down as many slang terms as you can come up with for lower female anatomy. Write it down, write it down.
Wait, I tried to watch more.
That's actually not that bad compared to some of.
Worse. I love that.
So bad.
Yeah. Wonder, it's gonna be like unlearned.
I don't want to read them.
I heard downstairs.
I feel like the ones that like are literally over the top. Like they just so
Me. Wonderful. Snapper.
That's funny.
All right, like 2 more minutes, 2 more minutes. It's so gross.
Down the stairs. Oh, this is. Yeah. But it sounds so funny.
I don't think, I mean, I know that one.
Lady cake. That was good. Yeah. Yes.
Excitement, you're like, I forgot that one.
Yeah. No, I think it's nether region. I've been tired. It's like the each administration.
All right. I'll give you one more minute, and we'll go through it.
Yeah, you go down. Breakfast in bed. What?
So we had Siege, Watt, Hole, Tuna Box, Pearl, Snap, Flower, Fanny, Gold. Everybody, Penis Flytrap, Penis Flytrap. Welcome Script, welcome Matt, Muffin, Drake, Bieber, Cunts, Baggy, Peck Peck, Kiki, Puyani, Batch. Stop going, Cookie.
It's got like a cadence going there, like a song. Right? That's lovely. I like that. Do you want to read yours? Don't worry if there's an overlap. Do you want to read yours?
Sure.
Don't try and censor, just do them all.
Oh, I'm not censoring anything.
I have it.
No punches.
I have it. All right, go for it.
All right. Pussy, gun, the JJ, the Duke, the honey pot, Venus flytrap, spoon, the lady garden, tuna canoe, snatch, insert name, like an actual person's name. People will name their genitals. Cooter, the genie, for the moose knuckle, beef flaps, split names, you've got the funny button and the bean and the
Tell you, you said one and it reminded me of a memory. I have to tell you a random story. So when we were in college, we went out to like this Japanese restaurant, my partner and I, and then this other couple that were both women as well. So it's like 4 lesbians sitting down at a sushi restaurant. I actually don't like sushi at all. Like I've tried so many times, it's not my thing. But my friend who's super like sheltered, the person came up and she's like, I'd like to order the vajayjay roll, please. And the woman like serving her just like was mortified. And my friend was like, what did I say? And I'm like, yeah, just it's a group of 4 lesbians and you just the vajayjay roll. She's sort of like the real thing. I'm like, I don't think think it is. I don't know. Like, it was the funniest thing ever, right? At a bar. But it was hilarious. This poor woman that was like serving us went back and you could see her tell like every single person and everyone mortified. My friend was like, I guess we can't come back here ever again. Anybody else have a list? Anyone else want to read theirs? Even if it's overlap, go for it.
Burger, flowers, snacks. Fanny bits, pink question mark, pastrami, curtains, maybe left panel, cookies, hard flaps, slot bench, mayonnaise, tang, prison perks, lamb, ocean, water park, city, lady beds, and forbidden fruit.
All right, I like it. Thank you. A lot of food names, right? Interesting. So you can start thinking about slang for breasts and male anatomy as well, right? Just start thinking in the back of your mind because they're both coming at some point. Anybody else have any more? Anyone else want to share? Or feel like we got a pretty good list there, right? My kids always say pirates. When they were little, they meant to say privates, but they're like, my pirates hurt. I was like, you're pirates. Oh, like, I'm like, oh, private. My poor Paisley, my poor daughter, like my buns hurt. Aren't your buns, Angel? Aren't your buns, right? We're pirates. My pirates are bothering me. Little kids always have an.
Yeah, this is so random. I think it's so funny. It's like how there can be like a different like category. Like there's some words that are so like poetic.
Yeah.
Like some people would even put like, you know, like forbidden fruit and all that stuff. And then you have like the completely vulgar side,
Right.
which with words you would never think that anybody would call it.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's this huge range, right? Yeah.
I actually grew up being taught like the medical terms and stuff because my mom actually found a study that if you use like kid-like words and stuff to describe your privates, you may be more prone to being like, I don't know, kidnapped by a predator or something because we find it cute or something like that. So
Interesting.
we were taught to use the actual medical terms.
Yeah.
My mom taught me the word testicles, and one time I got sent to timeout, and I was really mad. I got out of timeout like before I was supposed to, and she told me like, go back to the corner to timeout. And I said, fine, I'll take me and my testicles back.
I would have laughed and let you out of timeout for that one.
Oh, she was absolutely losing it.
Yeah, I can imagine. But how many of your parents taught you proper anatomy terms as a kid? Like, no, right? You're like, I gave them the sex talk, right? Yeah. And it's so most of us don't use these proper terms. Sometimes we don't even know them, right? Like, and it's important to know them. If you go to the doctor and you have something bothering you, you want to know the proper terms, right? You don't want to have to be like vague or use slang or say, you don't want to be like my Arby's meat curtains. It's like something awful like that, right? So many of those are so like vulgar. And so obviously like they're entertaining and they're funny, but it's important to know the proper terms. And so hopefully that's an area where we're all like growing with that. Because it is important to know, right? Like if something is bothering you, where is it bothering you? Or if someplace feels good or bad when you like stimulate or touch it, be nice to be able to communicate that to somebody. So it is important to know the proper terms, though we tend to use a lot of slang in our culture. And again, we'll do more slang later, so you can look forward to or dread that appropriately. Let's move to the internal structures of female anatomy. And a lot of you did beautiful on this part. I think people are more familiar with some of the internal structures. Your diagrams for these were typically quite good over there. So when we talk about internal structures, I wrote a few of them up here, and then we have them here on this diagram. The vagina, right, is the biggest internal structure, right, or the one that we talk about, I would say the most. So vulva and vagina, different things. Vulva, external. The vagina is an internal structure. And so what we can write up here, it's a very like muscular canal. Has a lot of nerve endings and blood vessels within it. Interesting random thing for you here. The vagina on its own is about 3.5 to 4 inches long. For all of the expectations and jokes and stereotypes we have about penis size, the vagina is naturally built to be about 4 inches. Now, it can obviously expand and get quite a bit like larger to accommodate for something bigger, to let a baby out. But for all of the stereotypes that we have, that's what the body is naturally built at, which is kind of an interesting little fact. So a very strong, like muscular canal plays a big role in arousal, plays a big role in childbirth, right? Has a lot of different functions to it. So it's an internal structure of female anatomy. The cervix is the spot at the end of the uterus or end of like the vagina. It's the cervix is the area between the uterus and the vagina. It plays a really big role in childbirth and pregnancy. When a woman is pregnant, the cervix closes up to maintain that uterine environment. And that's what starts to dilate and open up during childbirth and labor, which we'll talk about more later in the semester. The uterus plays a big role in fetal development. And also orgasm. So the uterus, which is kind of like a pear-ish shaped organ, is where a baby would grow during pregnancy. Right, so that is the area of the body where that would occur and grow. Also contracts quite a bit when women have an orgasm. It's very powerful muscles as part of it. And it contracts very intensely and strongly during childbirth and labor to help push that baby out of the vaginal canal. The fallopian tubes play a really big role in fertilization of an egg. So fertilization and pregnancy. So we have 2 fallopian tubes, right? One on each side coming out of the ovary and leading to the uterus. This is actually where fertilization takes place. So if a woman had intercourse and sperm was introduced into her system, egg and sperm would meet in the fallopian tube. And then that fertilized egg travels down into the uterus where it would implant into the wall and then pregnancy would occur. And every now and then you get things called ectopic pregnancies, if you've ever heard of that, or a tubal pregnancy. Sometimes what can happen is that egg can get stuck in the fallopian tube, which is actually quite dangerous and not super common, but it can happen. Typically, that's just where egg and sperm would meet, and then it continues its journey down to the uterus. The ovaries produce eggs or ova. They play a huge role in like hormones, in the menstrual cycle. We'll talk about next. All right, so the ovaries contain all of the eggs that we'll ever have. And a woman is born with every egg she will ever have, but they're immature. And so what happens is every month, as part of the menstrual cycle, which we'll talk about shortly, that signal is sent to one of the ovaries to produce an egg and have it mature and then be released. It's thought to be random. They kind of rotate back and forth, but that's where those eggs are produced, stored, and then released when the hormones are signaled or triggered for them to do so. So these are kind of like all of the main internal structures of female anatomy, obviously working with the external structures, but together, then we get kind of all of them, all of the pieces together. So any questions or thoughts or comments or anything about these? And the book defines them really well. I'm just kind of writing some like quick notes up here. So I mentioned that like several of these play a big role in like pregnancy and childbirth and hormones and the menstrual cycle. So we'll talk a little bit about the menstrual cycle for the rest of our time. Everyone's favorite topic, right? The menstrual cycle. My dad, when I was a kid, I shared this with my abnormal psych class. My dad, when I was a kid, would say, there's going to be a week out of the month where your mom's not herself. Just don't look her in the eye that week. Well, he's talking about PMS, right? We'll get there in a minute as well. Hormones and hormonal influences. Let me erase this so I can put something else up here. All right. So I have a little video that kind of introduces this, which I'll play in a minute. But let's define the term here. Menstruation is this cycle that we go through every roughly like 28 days or so. And it comes from menses and mene. So it's actually related to the moon and the lunar cycle. That's where it gets its name. So mene translates to moon. And menses is month. So it's this cycle of about a month. The lunar cycle is 29 and a half days. The average menstrual cycle is 28. So it's this whole like monthly cycle that women go through. And that's where the term comes from, related to the moon and the lunar cycle. So this tends to start for people on average for women, like right around the age of 11, is about 11 and a half is when most girls will get their first menstrual cycle or first period for the first time. Now it's an incredible range. My daughter, my oldest, got hers at 9. We were totally like unprepared for it. Like I'm normally the one in our family who doesn't think clearly. I had like a good moment here, and I think it's because I teach this class. But we were camping when she was 9, and my daughter came out. She's like, "I'm bleeding. I think I need to go to the hospital." It's like she was all terrified, and she was 9. So my partner like was freaking out. She's like, "Oh my God, she's hemorrhaging. Oh, we got to get her to the hospital." I'm like, "Baby, she started her like her period." And she's like, "Oh my God, I didn't even think of that." Like I was all calm. And then I had to go to the store and get her stuff, and then I freaked out, right? But it's crazy. It can happen anywhere like between like 9, even 8 isn't unheard of. But usually the average is right around 11 to 11 and a half when people have that first menstrual cycle, which we call menarche up there. And then the last menstrual cycle, or the ending of menstruation, is called menopause. And that tends to happen in someone's like late 40s, early 50s. So for a good chunk of most women's lives, they're menstruating, right? They are going through this process every month. And the whole goal of this process is to prepare for reproduction and having a baby, right? And that's the entire goal, the entire like design behind it. And there's kind of 4 phases that are occurring. We'll talk about these phases in a moment, but I want to play this little overview video. It's going to just kind of show you the process of what's happening, and then we can break it down and talk about it together. Different stages and so on, but I like that it kind of gives you that little bit of a visual. So the average menstrual cycle, right, is 28 days. Now, a lot of women don't have regular menstrual cycles, right? Sometimes people are like clockwork, and it's 28 days, 28 days. You can track it. It's very consistent. Other women like have very irregular cycles. It can be all over the place, which can make it difficult to get pregnant or avoid getting pregnant. And there's lots of things you can do about that, like birth control pills and things like that. But assuming like a 28-day cycle, we kind of go through this process over and over and over again, 4 different phases. So the first phase, which tends to last like roughly like 5 to 6 days, is the menstrual phase. It's right here. During the menstrual phase, that's when a person is like actively bleeding. They're shedding the lining of the uterus. So we can say shedding the lining of the uterus, which is called the endometrium. Right, and so that's what the blood and things that are coming out, it's that lining of the uterus that has prepared itself for a fertilized egg. Right, so if a woman has a fertilized egg that comes down and implants into the uterine wall, they won't have a menstrual cycle, right? They won't have that happen. They won't actively bleed. But we're assuming that like that hasn't happened here. So in this first phase, right, this is when that lining of the uterus is released, on average, like 5, 6 days. Some women much shorter, some women much longer. It's kind of all over the place. Your levels of stress, your hormones, your diet, all of that can also affect the length and intensity of your menstrual cycle. But this would be that time when you're actively like bleeding or losing that lining. The next phase right here is called the follicular phase. And follicular comes from follicle, right? So in this stage, in the follicular stage, the egg is starting to mature for release. So again, this is constantly happening, right? So as you have your menstrual cycle, after that ends, then we start building the next egg to be released for the next menstrual cycle. So right here, this is when the egg is maturing. right? Hormonal signals from the pituitary gland tell that ovary to have that egg mature to be ready to be released. And then what's going to happen is right around here, right around day 13 or 14, we get the ovulation phase. During the ovulation phase, that's when that egg is released. And we can actually test for this phase. When we have ovulation occurring, there's a huge surge of a hormone called LH, or luteinizing hormone, which was in the slides for chapter 4 and also in the textbook. But luteinizing hormone, there's a massive surge of it just before a woman ovulates. So if you've ever heard of somebody trying to track their ovulation, very similar to a pregnancy test, they would urinate on a little stick, and it's testing the urine for LH. Just before a woman ovulates, they have a massive surge of that hormone, right, indicating that the egg is about to be released. Now, you can use this knowledge to help you get pregnant if you were trying to get pregnant. You could also use this knowledge to help you avoid getting pregnant. And some people do this as like a natural birth control method or a natural contraceptive method. This period of time right here is called the fertile window, which means it is the time that you are the most likely to get pregnant. If you were to have like unprotected intercourse, or if you're trying to get pregnant, this would be when you would want to introduce sperm into someone's system. Because all of this time back here, there's no egg for the sperm to fertilize. It hasn't been released yet. So if you're having like intercourse anytime between day 1 and like 13 or 14, there's no possible, I won't say zero, but it's like next to zero chance that you would get pregnant because there's no egg there to fertilize. If you have unprotected intercourse right in here, you have a very high chance of getting pregnant because that egg is leaving the ovary and on its way down the fallopian tubes toward the uterus. So people use this knowledge to help them get pregnant or even avoid getting pregnant. And you can definitely have intercourse during your menstrual cycle. That's a matter of like preference for people. But anytime later in the month, you're going to be higher at risk. The closer you get to 28, the less. But this time in here tends to be that very fertile window. In the last phase, we call this the luteal phase. Up in here. And this is where we get that body called the corpus luteum. It's that little hard body that was produced in the ovary. And what that does is it sends signals to the body to keep building up that lining of the uterus, right? And if there's no fertilized egg that hits the uterus in that lining, then we start back over again here, that lining is shed, and then we start again building the next egg, it's ovulated, right? And then we have the lining building up, preparing to be released round and round and around for a good like 30 years or so, right? Depending on the person. So very involved cycle, a lot of hormones being released. And because there are so many different hormones being released, it's not uncommon for women to struggle a little bit at certain times during the month, right? Men don't have monthly cycles as far as like a menstrual cycle, but they do have like monthly hormonal cycles as well. It's much more subtle. But for women, what we can see is that you get a lot of like physical discomfort, like bloating, you might have cravings for food, irritability, moodiness, and a lot of that is related to these different hormones that are released as part of this cycle. Now, some women, this is really mild. Others, it can be very pronounced. It can even get so severe that we consider it a medical issue that requires treatment. So if women have like such intense depression around their menstrual cycle and these hormonal changes, we might call it premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, and it can require like birth control or antidepressants or some kind of treatment because it's so severe. But for most women, just PMS, right? And again, it's not every month, but it can be. A lot of people get cramps and so on in that period of time. Any questions, comments, stories, thoughts, anything here? Yeah. Yeah, it's super subtle, but like the androgens and testosterone, like as they're producing sperm, right, there is a little bit of like a fluctuation for men as well. And we tend to call it like andropause. right? Instead of menopause, it's like andropause. Men also go through like a slow declining of testosterone as they get older, which can decrease sex drive and other things as well. So it's much more subtle in men, but it's there, right? And so sometimes you can see like men having a little bit of moodiness or changes in mood as a result of their like slight hormonal cycles as well. And women can sync up with each other, right? I was in like an all-female dorm in college, and it wasn't uncommon for like 30 of the women to be menstruating at a time. The guys would be like, we stay away that month, right? Or that week of the month. But it's very common for women who live together to like sync up in their menstrual cycles due to pheromones, and just like those hormonal influences of being near each other can actually cause them to kind of sync a little bit. Anything else for now? Any other questions or anything? I had somebody send me like a little video of like the first moon party and kind of like talking about getting your menstrual cycle for the first time. But I think it's going to take us like right up to the end, and I want to be respectful of your time. So I think I'll stop here, and we'll pick up with this when I see you next. We'll keep going with female anatomy. We'll talk about, like reproductive health concerns, and then secondary sex characteristics. And then we'll move on to male anatomy as well. Don't forget that Wednesday is a flex day, so I won't see you Wednesday. And if you want to take a picture at all of your thing before I take them down, I'll leave them up here. Otherwise, I'll see you all on Monday next week, and we'll go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. What was that? Chester? I know.